Hi, good evening, everyone. I
Good
welcome you
evening.
all. Hi, I welcome you all to the second session of the online conference as part of April Dance. I'm really glad that our panelists could make time today and that they've joined us here to share their stories. Um, a little bit about April Dance. We have had this event for the last couple of years, and the primary idea was to get together. A group of dancers in the city wanted to come together, offer their, knowledge and expertise, and it was just an idea to come dance together on the occasion of Dance Day and offer workshops and discussions and performances. Um, so as we know, everything has gotten virtual. That's what we did too. And this is the first event taking place as part of April Dance this year. The primary idea for this online conference is how do we look back and ahead? And we have with us four esteemed panelists today. And Aditi will be moderating the session. A little bit about Aditi. She is a fantastic performer, dancer, director, former radio artist. She is also the artistic director of IAPAR and a wonderful, wonderful friend. So over to you, Aditi.
Thank you so much, Tanvi, for that. And I am just so happy to be a part of this wonderful company right now, this fantastic evening. I have with me Parvati ma'am, Parvati Datta, Dr. Parimal Phadke, Nathaniel, and Irene, who is in France right now. She's joining us from Paris. So welcome all of you, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. And I want to wish you a very happy week, month, and journey of dance as we begin our journeys into the celebrations of World Dance Day. So I'm going to come to all of you individually, and we're going to talk about the primary focus of this seminar, which is how do we look back and ahead. So when the pandemic hit us last year, it was too soon to say anything because we had no idea how all of this is going to, like how any of us is going to envision the changes that's going to bring to our, let's say, our lives and our careers. So basically I would like to go to each one of you to help us navigate through your journeys, your careers, your perspectives on art and dance, and see how this has changed for all of you. And to do that, I would like to first invite Parvati ma'am, Parvati Datta, who is a performing artist, a thinker, researcher, and also the founder director of Mahagami Gurukul in Aurangabad. She's also associated with the MGM University as Dean of Performing Arts with IIM Bangalore and many other esteemed universities and organizations as an advisor and guest. I don't think it'll be enough for me to actually mention her whole journey or the talent that she carries. And I think I'm going to, because she's someone who doesn't really need a lot of introduction. A lot of dancers around us beyond just Maharashtra, India, or the world, they are all very familiar with her expertise. She's a Kathak and an Odissi performer, and she is someone who's worked extensively as an active commentator on the arts, heritage, ecology, endology, education, and media studies. So Parvati ma'am, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. How are you? How are you doing?
Well, I'm fine, good.
Perfect. Can you just quickly take us through how this whole year, how the journey of your art, your dance has been, your work has been? How are you looking back, and what are the reflections for you?
Well, I think for just the way it happened with most of us, we've been performing artists too. And I quite remember that my last visit was to Pune to be part of a seminar in Pune University, after which I think the next day we were to travel for a festival in Agartala, which was organized by Sangeet Natak Academy. So suddenly there were talks about this kind of uncertainty and about the kind of alerts and warnings that are being issued with respect to health care and precautions. And that's how suddenly we discovered that I was in Pune that time when I discovered that the festival is sort of postponed because of the current situation. And then it all began, like how there were few performances and few projects lined up that were getting postponed. And we were trying to initially we were just trying to navigate through yeah, through the updates that we were getting every day, and trying to be very adaptive, very creative, very positive, at the same time working on our coping mechanism. But very soon I think we realized that this is going to take some time. And for many of us, like I run a dance gurukul, and all these years we've never actually considered online teaching as a method by choice to impart dance education. Though we have in different phases worked on creation of digital content, learning content, but that was mainly as a supplement and not as a substitute to teaching. So from there, when we began, and I could immediately realize that there are many layers to this kind of journey, because there are different challenges with every learner, every practitioner, and being part of an institution with like I am basically associated with three spheres of activities. I also work for a school which is in a remote area. It's in a rural region. So then I immediately realized that there are different challenges for people from different demographic and different backgrounds and different locations, but we all are living a similar life. While I was also observing that many artists were absolutely shattered by this whole thought that they will not be dancing on stage for the next few days or few weeks or few months. That was immediately something like a setback for many of them. For me personally, I thought, since I am part of a community, my immediate responsibility was to see how we can sail through this kind of turbulent days as a community, while taking care of each other, while remaining sane, remaining creative. And so I focused more on community development. And to begin with, when we started our online programs, the first of the programs, the webinars that we started organizing were on emotional wellness. So I was not holding programs with dance gurus or practitioners, interviewing them, but I thought this is something that I should be doing. I should be inviting psychiatrists, people from psychology, emotional wellness, come and talk to dancers and creative people, and let us all investigate and understand what you mean by emotional hygiene or coping mechanism, because this is something which is becoming the most important thing. So with that we began, and then gradually I started adapting to the online digital platforms. I did try connecting with my students. In the course of time, I also realized that there were many remote learners and aspirants who had always wanted to come to Mahagami Gurukul and learn with us. Somehow they got connected. They became our immediate family. And so there was a new kind of synergy, new kind of dynamics that I realized, which was online, it was virtual, but it was something very close knit. And with them, I started working on newer ideas. So then we had many webinars, online workshops on textual studies, Indology, Natya Shastra, theater, even theater. Not doing the practical part, but yes, discussing about many things, Drupad, Drupadangi, Kathak, calligraphy, and so on. And I started responding to the situation. Suddenly, the Gurukul, which was always uh, it pulsated with a lot of activities. There were kids coming over during the day. There were adult learners living in the Gurukul, following a lifestyle and learning very rigorously. Suddenly, there was some kind of pause, and I could only see the birds chirping. and the trees swaying in silence. That brought newer revelations, and I tried translating some of these observations and revelations into my dance creations. So I came up with a Krishna Tandava, where I just imagined that there is a there is an invisible Krishna who walks through these asymmetrical pathways of the Gurukul and is dancing the sublime dance, and his flute can be heard through these swaying trees and chirping birds. So that, and then a very imaginative Pallavi in Rag Desh as a tribute to the space, because I immediately realized that for dancers, space is a challenge. And for most of us, I think we realize that space is also a luxury. When you are confined to your own flats and small little spaces and with neighbors and families and things like that, space does matter. It matters, it's the most valuable thing. And then there's a space within, there is a space around, there is a space to be imagined, there is a space to be energized. So I thought, why not create a small dance piece as a tribute, as a homage to space? So these were some of the things that immediately came into my mind, and I kept on working in solitude, sometimes in a connected way, working on some of the research projects that were lined up and were pending for a very long time. And I just kept thinking that I should maybe devote some time and work on that. So maybe this lockdown period also facilitated a revival of such research projects. And so I was able to work on a little bit of Sangeet Samay Sar, write a research paper on that. So at various levels, I realized as an individual, as an artist, as a teacher, as part of a community, there were many things, and I just realized that one has to have a 360-degree vision to start understanding how things are going to unfold, and what lies next for an artist. One more thing which I have often been reflecting on, and then this is not something to do with the lockdown, this always used to bother me even before that, was that for a very long time, dance, music, and all these performing arts, we are being very much more connected and obsessed with the idea of performing. Whereas I think that performance is only one layer of it. There are many other layers, the deeper layers, and there should be phases where we allow ourselves to go through a contemplative journey, to just let some ideas germinate and take some shape, and not with any deadline, not with any kind of busy schedule, things like that. An artist needs that kind of space also. So at that level, yes, it was a time when I thought many artists did benefit from this kind of a silence, and they did come up with creative expressions or self reflection and things like that. But since this kind of pause was not just something that was a luxury, it is a crisis, and it's a growing crisis. So as human beings, we are also getting little uh, concerned um about how uh, how to live with positivity, how to continue taking care of each other, how everyone can be safe and protected, and sail through this kind of crisis with all safety and without any danger. So that is also one aspect of it, and dance does facilitate understanding these layers too, if one is reflective and sensitive enough to do that.
Yes. For sure. Thank you so much for that thought. And I'm going to come back to that. And I'm sure all of us who are a part of this session today would want to sort of hear more from not just you, but all the other panelists also that we have. So thank you, ma'am. We're definitely going to reflect back on it. And I'm going to come back to you with some more questions. But before we move on, I would like to introduce our second panelist artist who's joined us. Our neighbor in the city itself. So one of this fantastic go-to person that a lot of dancers in Pune, and not just in Pune, across India also go to, Dr. Parimal Phadke. He is the associate professor at Lalit Kala Kendra, Pune University. Also an established performer, teacher who has performed and traveled all across the globe. Some of the countries that he's often toured being Switzerland, Malaysia, Russia, France, Spain, USA, with his Bharatanatyam solo and ensemble performances. Along with that, he's also presented his research papers in international conferences at Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, Thailand, Segovia, Spain, Vancouver, and someone who, like I said, a lot of student fraternity, dancers fraternity go to in the city of Pune, a very loved performer and professor, Dr. Parimal Phadke. Parimal, I would like to welcome you to today's session. And I think I'm going to hand over to you the same doubts, the same concerns that we all share in the field of art, dance. 2020, reflecting back and going ahead. Your thoughts?
Right. For me, 2020 was a dramatic year, not just because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I was about to direct and shoot my first music video. So it was a bold attempt to diversify my talents and also use my additional postgraduate degree in television production. I was working on it for the last 9 months. I had started the work in 2019, September, and we were about to shoot in March. The first day of the shoot in March 2020, and we get to know Prime Minister has announced the lockdown. My storeroom stacked with all the properties required for the shoot, hoping to see the light of the day. That was the end of the project then. As a teacher, I shifted all my classes online without even wasting a day. Since then, I have not taken a holiday in the context of my online theory and practical lessons. The practical classes actually are a respite for my students and me too. My practice got affected the most, as I belong to the category of professionals who do not own a studio but rent a school hall for my practice and classes. In such a scenario where everything was going to be shut for the next 9 months, the only solution was to have a proper fitness schedule. I have fortunately maintained a sincere protocol of fitness since then, as that is the only anchor which might help me post-corona, whenever that happens. While I was at the center of my own universe in strategizing all of this, I realized that all the students who are just going to start as professionals in the field are worst affected. It was time something needed to be done for them. They would be surrounded by questions of finance, insurance, savings, investments. So taking into account the target audience, I ran a series of Insta Live interviews from the midweek of April till June 1st week, covering topics like fitness for dancers, savings and investments, insurance strategies, to topics like the arts in crisis. I tried to cover the micro and the macro aspect, which is connected to the current generation of professional dancers. And while the series was happening, the International Dance Day happened on 29th of April with gala celebrations of dance performances being broadcast and shot on social media. It was one of the most unusual experiences for me as a person, artist, and a citizen. It brought this undisturbed crack existing in the dance community and the society that we Indians live in. The privileged in arts who rejoice and the underprivileged in arts who are seeking help. The scar of this realization has been borne by this mind, and I hope it never gets erased. By default, I did not dance on any of the festival events. All this reality for me was too much to grasp and digest. There were aesthetic issues which I was dealing with too. Dance is made for the stage, or if not a stage, for a certain space. If a repertoire which is cut out for a stage is suddenly replaced in your drawing room or bedroom, what does it say? Does that mean you're literally exhibiting your bathroom singing? But bathroom singing is for your own self. Granted that singing is not your passion and dancing is. So being a student of television, also broadcasting live from my home was chucked out of the window very early. The medium I understood was the video. So just putting a camera in front of the dancing body was not fulfilling my creative or aesthetic needs. In the whole of the year, I released 2 6-minute videos, which was commission work. One, which was trying to explore interpretations of a lyric poem by 2 different artists, and the other, which was looking at different perspectives of characters and story. These choreographies were designed like a film and not like I would perform in a space. As a teacher, I have mixed feeling towards the digital medium. While the personal communication interaction is missing, students who wouldn't have availed my services from far off places literally have joined. Parvati Didi has already stated that. Some of my students who are now based in the foreign countries have rejoined me after learning that I was going online. This was the takeaway from me. So I have got my family back, so to say. Being in an academic field, this period of lockdown gave me the time to rethink my research on several areas. Parvati Didi is here today, and I was fortunate to present my research again this year at her very well curated seminar on the performing arts, which is called the Mahagami Sarangdev seminar, Mahagami Sarangdev seminar, which went online this year. Even the last year, her seminar was blended, had both offline and online participants. I have reasons to believe that the next year it might become bigger and extensive in terms of quality and quantity. At the Pune University, where I'm working, the Center for Performing Arts organized a webinar designed by Guru Shama Bhatia on the concept of sensuality, erotica, and vulgarity in art across all disciplines. This was one of the biggest academic feats achieved, according to me, going into an area where all Indians shudder to go and speak. So the digital space has paved the way for much more accessibility. I'm looking at so many wonderful workshops, panel discussions, which have been made possible only due to the digital medium, which we are utilizing to the maximum due to the corona pandemic. My question as a dancer, teacher, and researcher is, can the next generation take this up as a full-proof career? At a recent lecture for a local college on the topic of dance as a career, I had to make it clear that plan B has to be ready. This means just being a dancer in a country like India is not going to be your safety net now. There are so many stories which I've heard of dance classes coming to a close because the students or teachers were ill-equipped in terms of technology or unaffordability of the technology, or just plain unaffordability. A few years back, I remember that we as teachers would advise students to take up an allied discipline like light design, videography, photography, vocal singing, playing of an instrument as your additional backup plan. In today's times where we are seeing a whole performing arts industry collapse in one jab, this advice is passé. Now, I'm advising students to equip themselves with a skill which is not linked to performing arts at all. Such are the times, and such is the learning. At this point, I must also cite an example of my student who has found out a unique way of becoming self-sustaining through the online medium. They are registered as teachers on web portals and are earning good sum through online dance teaching. All through this pandemic, there was this big question looming over my head. How does art contribute to the national income? Because government and government policies only understand the language of numbers. In the light of this, while I read some interesting articles from USA and UK about how the arts and culture have contributed to the national income, I don't see any such measure or means which can push me to argue in favor of the arts in my country. Yes, the film industry and the numbers there can definitely help. But then what about the performing arts, other performing arts? How do we measure what they contribute? How do we measure the contribution of a community towards the well-being of a society? Patronage and government support is not going to be the answer here. We have all our experiences in post-independent India to tell us that. We have to find ways where artists needs to acquire another skill and become self-sustaining. If that is the direction we are moving towards, then all those eager, over-enthusiastic artists who are displaying their art for free on the web should rethink as to what norms are they setting for the future performing arts industry. In a way, this corona pandemic has brought extreme bad news for the underprivileged. For the privileged, it has been a time for soul searching. This paradox is the ultimate truth for me. So while I have been digesting this truth, the director in me got back on its feet, and I finally shot the music video this year in Jan and released it in Feb. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for that. And for people who have just joined us, the music videos that Parimal has spoken about, they're out on Facebook and your Instagram and YouTube, right? So people can go and check that out. And thank you so much, Parimal, for taking us through that journey. And it really does trigger a lot of intense questions personally as a practitioner of arts. And just from what you had actually mentioned, I was talking to somebody a couple of months ago, and there were serious concerns about a lot of artists becoming redundant and not being able to keep up in the next 10 years to come if they don't sort of look at what is happening around and keep up with the changes that are hitting us so rapidly. So I will come to that again, and we shall discuss it in detail. In the meantime, I would like to welcome Nathaniel. Nathan, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. We have Nathaniel Parchment from finding his home through London, through Europe, and now in India. Nathan is currently based in Goa. He is a performer and a freelance choreographer, along with a teacher and a sharer of all things art that has led to the Goa dance residency that was initiated in 2017. While he has a lot of accolades and honors and scholarships in his bag, there's also extensive travel, extensive sharing of performance, expression, embodied practices, conscious movement research. So Nathan, I welcome you here today, and I would invite you to share a little bit of your travels, your journey, especially looking back at 2020 and how this whole year has turned out for you. You're joining us from Goa today, so if there's anything you would like to share with all of us.
Sure, thank you, and good evening to all of the panelists and everyone watching. 2020, we had started our Goa Dance residency in January, and previously we had had a project in December at the Serendipity Arts Festival here, where most of our Indian scholarship students were involved in performing over that festival. We then were joined by our international cohort for January, February, and March. There's, I think there were 40 of us in total, actually. There's a dog chasing off some monkeys. And yeah, we had an amazing time with both our international and our Indian cohorts here in Goa, performing once a month and training all day, every day. Of course, when the lockdown happened, this was in March, and we were kind of just a couple of weeks before the end of our residency. So it came as a big shock to everybody that we had to start to be very conscious of our health and possibly stop training whilst we were all living together. It was a very surreal experience. However, luckily we were able to manage to keep each other sane, stay positive. I think part of the benefit of being in Goa is that there's not such a high population density. There's a lot of open space and a lot of nature. So yes, we were very lucky in that regard to be blessed with space. Your Poverty Mum was mentioning how valuable space is, and that's something that we were very aware of, that though we were going through a difficult time, we were extremely privileged and extremely lucky to be in a space where we could all be together. So not only were we valuing space, but we were also valuing community and connection. As a residency, we're all in close proximity, so we were able to isolate ourselves as a bubble. During that lockdown and the repatriation of our international participants over the following month, our Indian students, which totaled just over 10, unfortunately didn't have the luxury of being able to be repatriated to their respective home states, as state borders were still closed. However, our international students could go home, which they did. About 4 or 5 remained, some of whom are still here. So we came to a situation where monsoon was about to happen, and we needed to think what to do. Anyway, luckily, we were able to stick together and continue to train and to continue to use the space that we had here. And yes, it was a very, very easy decision to just keep going. We were aware, and everybody was aware, that the dance community was going through such a difficult time, unable to be together, unable to enter their dance spaces. And we were very lucky and very privileged to be able to have a space. So we focused solely on taking advantage of that situation as much as possible, and really, yeah, valuing that privilege that we had. So we spent about 3 to 4 months continuing to be in the studio, living together and training together. And this was a huge help to our physical health and also to our mental health as well. This kind of came to an end around September, October time. And then we decided to carry on with our plans when things died down. We were in India for the next residency, and lucky we just finished a 3-month program, and it seems to be just in time, so that we're not stuck in the same situation as we were before with the previous lockdown. Yeah. So it's an interesting situation, and yes. Having continued to work throughout the whole time, yes, it's interesting to be in a similar situation now, but perhaps not have so much pressure and responsibility as there was last year. I just wanted to, so that's just a little bit of my experience. It's quite a busy experience. I just wanted to talk about a couple of things that I noticed that was happening internationally that was really inspiring to me. I didn't have much time to really keep in touch with what was going on. But there's just a couple of things specifically in the UK, actually. I'm from the UK, so I'm more connected with that area. A couple of organizations. Recently, the Rombear Dance Company, which is one of the foremost contemporary dance companies in the UK, created a project called, actually I'm not even sure what it's called, I think it's called Rooms. Anyway, it was an immersive dance for camera performance that was, I think, first of all, it was done in their studios. So their studios were turned into performance spaces. And the online performance was a roaming immersive experience. I thought this was really innovative, whereby just like what was being said before, it wasn't simply putting a camera in front of the dancing body. The dancing bodies were put into a space that was created by the camera, and this kind of innovative work to create online work specific for the viewer, I think was really, really exciting and interesting. So I urge anyone who is interested in making work for the screen to have a look at the Rombear Dance Company and what they did. Another thing that was really exciting and interesting for me was the work of independent dance in London. They moved some of their classes online, but what they also did was provided different types of intervention. So they have regular morning classes, but what they would do also, some of their teachers would provide some audio, some written interventions, some video, and other resources that dancers could then take and use in their own time to develop their research. So rather than just doing a class for an hour and a half, they had the whole day to really dive deep into those resources at their leisure and to develop their practice, which I thought was really wonderful and innovative, and something that was, it really inspired me at the time. Something very unique that come out of this difficult situation. Something else that I noticed, something I'd like to say positive, something really positive that came out of this situation was that suddenly the dance world became a lot smaller. And many dance studios, dance companies, dance pioneers and artists around the world that have never been available to dancers in India, suddenly their doors were opened. And I think that this is a huge revolution for dance and dancers in India to have such a close connection with the dance world internationally. Suddenly, those dancers in India who may want to take advantage of training abroad but would never have the opportunity, suddenly are able to do class with the Cunningham Company, or go and do class with the Graham Company, or Limon, or whatever, something that maybe hasn't been known before. And many other companies and artists around the world suddenly opened their doors to a portion of society who have not had access to the wide range of dance education around the world. And so I think that this situation has really given a boost to this idea of arts education equity internationally. For me, this is something that's really important, to try to make sure that dance education is accessible. And I think that we've made a really, there's been a lot of progress in this area due to the current crisis. Another positive thing that I think has come out of this is that suddenly, because everything has been online, again, dancers in India have had to really start to do their research and connect with other dance makers. And so I think that, this outward-looking connection, especially via social media, has changed the potential for dancers for a really, really long time. And those young dance artists who want to speak with the world have the means to do so, and have been inspired to do so over the past year. I think this is really exciting. Yes, I think that's kind of all really I have to say at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, that's really interesting, and thank you so much for sharing that. It's also wonderful to actually just hear perspectives from the urban areas, like crowded cities, to actually smaller spaces that have the luxury of space and just the space to breathe and just be outside sitting with trees and
yes, and the situation last year, and also that is happening now again, the value of space, the value of nature, the value of connecting with the earth has become ever more prominent. And this idea of the body being in touch with one's environment. We're very lucky here at the Goa Dance Residency to be able to embody this all of the time.
Yes, also actually reminds me of the emotional hygiene that Parvati ma'am mentioned earlier when she spoke about her year and her reflections. So coming back to the wonderful four, I'm going to quickly introduce Irene, and I'm going to bring her in right now and just ask her to share a little bit about her travels through 2020, looking back, looking ahead. Irene is based, currently she is in Paris in France, but from Netherlands, and she started dancing when she was 8 years old. She's also a fantastic performer, teacher. She's gone ahead and studied performing arts and further education. She completed at the Cunningham Dance Academy in the dance company in New York City, where she received the Foreign Fulbright Scholarship. Of course, amongst through the other accolades and achievements, she is currently based in Paris, but also works at the Holland Dance Festival. Irene is the head of education and participation department, where she sort of brings in the two expertise together of artistic and organizational responsibility. We will also be watching a performance that Irene has produced. It's called Exitum, which will be featured as a part of April Dance on the 29th of April. So we will be watching that performance soon. And before we go on to that, Irene, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome, and take us through your journey a little bit, your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. And thank you for screening the film later in the week. Very happy to be joining from my small apartment in Paris. When we talk about space, that is quite a contrast with Nathaniel's environment. 2020 has been a complicated year, I think. And what I will try to do is reflect a little bit on it, because I have, like all of us here, I think, different hats. It feels like my performer, choreographer hat, my teacher hat, and my head of the education and outreach department at the Holland Dance Festival. So I used to commute between Paris and The Hague in the Netherlands, because I would part-time work for the Holland Dance Festival every week. Of course, that came to an abrupt halt the moment the lockdown started, and I haven't left Paris since. That is a really odd feeling for someone who likes to travel and likes to discover new cultures by actually putting my feet on the ground. I've had the pleasure to teach at Atakalari in Bangalore for a couple of years, and I'm now teaching here at a professional training program in the heart of Paris. I think the most immediate effect of the lockdown and the pandemic was that all of my students had to go home, and we were confined, exactly as we were talking about, to this digital space, to this communication through screens, and trying to teach. My specialization is Cunningham, and it's a technique that requires quite a bit of space. The basic exercises can be done in place, but as soon as the class moves along, we really need our space to travel, and having to sort of reinvent the technique and the possibilities of giving feedback and talking with the students, all the while taking care of their mental health, because putting 18 to 21-year-olds back in an 8-square-meter bedroom and trying to motivate them to keep coming to class on a little screen on a daily basis is a challenge that I think none of us were prepared for during our own experience and training. So I think that was something that was very, took a lot of sort of rethinking who you are, what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing, and how you can make your classes accessible. And I know that I'm in a very privileged situation that all of my students did have a screen and an internet connection. So I was able to reach out to them and stay in contact with them. All the while realizing that also for them, it was really not easy. They had left their families to move to Paris to train in a city where they didn't know anyone. And then they were all confined to this little space. I think for my work as the head of the education and outreach department of the Holland Dance Festival, I was lucky enough to have a team of producers, dance teachers, people with very creative minds, with a very strong desire to keep going, knowing the value, not the monetary value as we spoke about, but the non-tangible value of dance and the things that it does for people when it brings people together. In the Holland Dance Festival, we work a lot with different target groups. I work a lot with older people in care homes. I work a lot with bringing disabled and non-disabled dancers together in the same space. And those are already groups that are in a more difficult position in our current society. And with the pandemic hitting, that became even more evident that they were not in the positions that they had the easiest access to the online alternatives that were offered. But my team, thankfully, was incredible in coming up with all kinds of solutions for offering classes, for looking into the possibility of making translations of classes to YouTube recordings, to Zoom classes, to sitting for hours and hours on the phone to call everyone, to check in with everyone that they were okay. And I think what was also interesting is that, as Nathaniel said, the world became a lot smaller. All of a sudden, we were able to collaborate with dance companies and teachers from other countries to offer these classes, or to bring people even from other parts of the Netherlands. When we talk about accessibility, people with disabilities that have a lot more trouble physically making themselves arrive in a dance studio, to be able to join us through Zoom where they couldn't before. I think that is a very positive side of this rethinking how you teach dance class and what your space is. And I think that positivity also translated to my work as a choreographer, as a producer, knowing that through Zoom, it became a lot easier, or Skype or whatever the medium was, a lot easier to collaborate with other artists that were on the other side of the planet. So the film that will be screened later in the week, for example, is a composer who lives in LA, who I met 3-4 years ago once at a concert. A choreographer from Italy, dancers from Paris. You know, we had this whole team that we were working mostly remotely to just finally, for the weekend of the shooting, bring everyone together in the same space. Of course, the choreographer is still in LA. She never made it to Paris, but I think that's a really interesting, positive twist that comes out of this. The development of how we use technology got sped up incredibly. I don't think this would have happened as fast if we hadn't been hit by the pandemic. And being forced to rethink how you work also came with a lot of beautiful new alternatives. Cannot wait to properly be back in studios and be able to work together with physical bodies in the same space, don't get me wrong. But I am very eager to see what stays also from the things that we found.
Yes, that is such a wonderful thought to share. And I think and I always say it, that while we are actually mourning what we have lost and making space to deal with the negative, we are also very desperately hoping to see what good stays and comes out of this. And on this note, I think I'm going to just bring all four of you together. And we also have some participants on Zoom, and some people are watching us on Facebook. So if any of you have any questions, anything you want to share, please feel free. I'm going to come back to the four of you with this one question that has been constantly, triggering me, because all four of you are very extensively involved in education, in teaching, in nurturing, in sharing. So dance has a very direct relationship to culture. And because it's not like technology did not exist before the pandemic, everything, all of this was there. Just the way that we have now started using it has sort of left away the conventional and making space for something new. So how do you look at this, as reimagining beliefs and practices that are no longer valid as conventional, mundane, or the regular? Like Parvati ma'am said, that performance doesn't just remain the center of the narrative anymore. It's time to look beyond. So this question is for all four of you, and if you would like to elaborate a little bit more or shed some light on how do you want to, or sort of look at the conventional, or reimagining the beliefs. Even like for Parimal and Parvati ma'am, because like the Guru Shishya Parampara and everything that we have set in our tradition is so strong, and it's so sort of solid to even shake something like that, because suddenly now the teacher and the students are all in the same frame, the technology. So how are you looking at this shift?
I think it's interesting. It's interesting. I'm not quite sure whether classical dancers are really thinking in the context of aesthetics, though, because as I mentioned earlier, that the same repertoire is being done again inside the four walls of the room. So I'm not really sure whether they are questioning what is their relationship of the content with the space. So most of the classical dance forms come from spaces which are either temple or courts. And here you are dancing those compositions in the four walls of your home, where you neither have a temple, you have a temple inside your home. That's true. But what is that space of your home? What is the kind of vibe which is giving to you? How do you negotiate and fit that same content is something which people are rethinking. Are they, is the question. I think the youngsters have got on pretty fast. The youngsters have understood that they will have to change the content very fast. They will have to rethink their strategies. It's not it's not people from my generation who are really doing the thinking. I think so. That's what my observation is. The youngsters have understood that probably the attention span on the screen is not going to be more than 30 seconds or 1 minute. So whatever has to happen within those 30 seconds. So I am actually probably trying to say that I'm not sure whether people are going to watch concerts on the screen, because the kind of context of the concert and the kind of ambience which you need to watch a concert of solo 1 hour concert, it needs a different kind of a setup, according to me. I'm not sure whether people of my generation will sit in front of a screen and say, oh, I'm going to watch a Kathak concert, or I'm going to watch a Bharatanatyam concert from beginning to end. I really don't know. They would immediately shift to an OTT platform. And that is my problem here, that the OTT platforms, which are, far more entertaining, and what you need right now is entertainment, diversion from all that which is happening around, because that is how you're going to keep yourself sane. So I'm not sure how we are placing ourselves in that framework. Where do we put ourselves in that framework? But I would say the youngsters are understanding that very fast. I'm not sure whether I'm not going to evaluate or judge that as good art or bad art. I'm not getting into that seat. But I'm definitely going to say that they know what it needs to be done, and they know what's going to happen probably in the future. People of my generation, sorry.
No, please complete what you will.
People of my generation are still not ready to come back from that, what they experienced on the proscenium. It's very difficult to erase that part of it, because you've grown with that whole structure, right? And suddenly you come onto the screen and say, yes, now I'm going to present a composition on the screen, and there's no interaction of energies which happen in a live performance. That's the beauty of live performance. There's an interaction of energy between the viewer and the performer. How is the screen going to send you that energy? Through those thumbs and the likes and the hearts? I mean, this is unimaginable. Yeah. So this is my dilemma now. Where are we going with this kind of deal? Over to Didi.
Yes. And there's one more thing that I've been thinking since a while, since almost a year. I've never actually done a Facebook Live, never done a performance, even when people had already started doing this before the lockdown also. There were many dancers and musicians who were actually going online and doing lovely things. But I think somehow conceptually, theoretically, and aesthetically, as Parimal says, and for me also the spiritual dimension of it, because why did we at all choose to become dancers? Are we looking at dance as entertainment, or as an equity, or as an enterprise, or as of now we are looking at it as a digital content? So that is where we are going wrong, because we are trying to replicate whatever we were doing on stage. We are just trying to replicate that into a digital content, and we are expecting people to watch that. So I just did one online streaming in this full 1 year, which was Vayam. And I felt little satisfied, because we did it in a very different way. We took all the spaces of our Gurukul. We chose different lovely locations where the girls could come one by one, because of the social distancing and all the protocol. So they didn't dance together. And I just loved the energy of each dancer dancing alone. So this is something which is the positive part of it, is that since a very long time, there was more emphasis and interest in dancing together. I think dance gurus or educators or dance institutions, they were creating big groups, and they were creating group work. Whereas with most of our traditional dances, the solo margam, the solo repertoire, and the abhinaya, that intimate, in an intimate setting, that was always the core of it. And we were sort of shifting away from that since more than 2 decades. We were not training and teaching dancers to become competent soloists who would be able to catch the attention of the audience for a 1 hour or a 2 hour concert. And so I think this lockdown has also brought that kind of opportunity for us to work with intimate spaces, because whenever the lockdown is lifted and whenever there's an opportunity to come back, I'm sure we will be more interested to present solos and packaged well with abhinaya, with good sahitya, with good music. It's not about spectacle, it's not about the gimmicks, and it's not about all that big spectacle that you create on large spaces. So as Parimal also spoke about proscenium, since a very long time I've been discussing and debating, when do we bring our dances back from proscenium to baithaks, to intimate spaces, to open air spaces, and to spaces that are close to nature, which I have been trying to do at Mahagami. I've been trying to host our festivals in smaller places where not many people can be accommodated, but I love the energy because it's more intimate. The whole participation and the whole organic pranic and philosophical development and exchange that you experience is richer. So we just have to wait for things to be closer to normal to come back. And I think in the meantime, some of us must have definitely worked on reviving the lost elements of our pedagogical design and reimagining our dance history again. And whatever we had thought was not so important to be presented is being again revived. I'm sure many dancers are doing that. I'm also trying to do that. And looking beyond, I think there are many more things to incorporate. So that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you. Thank you. And it also actually kind of brings me to this point where, especially because we have two classical, two contemporary performers, I have been someone who, like, I trained in Kathak earlier and then went on to explore contemporary. It sort of brings me to this point where we are looking at two different parts of the same space, you know, like for classical, you hear of this leaving the proscenium, going into intimate. For contemporary, it's sort of the other way around, because as contemporary dancers, we are so comfortable with dancing in habitats that are, you know, unconventional, or dancing around trees, or in the mud, or in a house, or wherever it is. So Nathan and Irene, would you like to jump in here in terms of how you are looking at this pedagogy, and, you know, how you are imagining things to change, perhaps, or the reflections that we have? Yeah.
Like, just we recently have been during our program having regular Friday open studio events. So not holding large proscenium performances, but opening our studio to the local community to come in and view the choreographic research of our students and artists in process. And a lot of this has been in the studio, and some of it has been site-specific within our space here at Samato in Goa. And just going back to this idea of intimacy, I think that both during the lockdown last year and also coming up to it again, everyone is so much more sensitive to the human condition, to our inner landscape. And this is something that often only dance can actually communicate. So I honestly feel that dance and dance performance, especially away from entertainment and towards something more intimate, is becoming more needed and hopefully more valued. So I have a hope that that this need and this value interprets itself as an increase in audience, basically kind of helping audience development. And I'm talking specifically within an Indian context, that the layman, the person who maybe would never go to a dance theatre, is more ready to recognize the value of a human being expressing their inner landscape to another human being. And that this does not have to be on a large proscenium stage with lights. It can be in an intimate space. And this is really important as as a ritual experience. And I think this is where contemporary and classical dance really, really do come together. It's the same thing. It's about the human condition. And this is what we work to communicate. So yes, when it comes to performance spaces, audience development, and especially developing infrastructure for dance, both education and performance, the more natural space, the more intimate space, and the public space, I think, are vital. That artists can come out and be performing in the streets or be performing anywhere around their locality and giving that gift to others in their locality. I think this is really, really important. Amazing though reality shows are in creating an audience for dance over the past 20 years, it's been a huge, amazing thing. Finding this really, really special connection, this human connection between people in local spaces, between people, I think, yeah, I think it's really important. I have a huge hope that this is going to sort of germinate and grow a new, unique, innovative type of dance infrastructure in India.
Irene?
Yeah, I think listening to all this, there are two things that come to mind. And I think the first thing is more related to my experience as a teacher. And I think what is beautiful and what I hope stays in the chaos that might actually follow this pandemic is to go back to exactly why you're doing what you're doing. And not to get lost in the aesthetics of something, or, you know, to really go back to the base when you design a class or when you think about a workshop, to go back to the core of what it is that you're trying to teach, trying to share. And I think that is something that I find very crucial. And with the pause or the time that has been available through the pandemic, through the lack of travel time, things like that, time freed up to sit down for a little bit longer before entering into a class context. And that is something that I really hope that can stay, because it takes more into account the individual student, as you were talking to the individual performer that you're coaching, and the way you communicate with this individual about what it is that you're trying to pass on to them. And that goes for all types of students, the most virtuosic ones in the professional training programs, or a student that I might have in a wheelchair that has a completely different perception of what movement is to them. But when you go back to the core of what you're trying to say or what you're trying to teach, that works for everyone, because it works on this human level that Nathaniel was also talking about. And the other thing that I find interesting when listening to all of this is that I do think that there is a potential for an audience in this digital context. We had last week with the Holland Dance Festival our first real live stream performance that was a whole evening length performance. It took us some time to get there, because if we were going to do it, we wanted to do it right. And we had this young dancers there, we call them the talents of the future. So the tour is normally called Talent on the Move. And we decided to live stream one performance to give them sort of the energy to prepare for something again, to be in a bubble together, to train together, to be on a stage together. And we had over 1,500 people who signed up for this performance, which the Netherlands is not a very big country. So that is quite, yes, exactly. It felt like quite an achievement. And I'm guessing they're also not all young people from the responses that we got back. So it's getting to a point where also an older generation feels comfortable enough to access this sort of online environment, this digital environment, has their TVs or their computers set up to sit with their own cup of coffee in front of their screen to experience this performance. And I sat in front of a screen myself trying to feel what that felt like. It's definitely not the same thing, but as a way of paving the way for people towards contemporary dance, for example, which is not always the easiest thing to watch, I think it's quite interesting to make it make the threshold so low that we offered it for free, and if you wanted to make a donation you could, but you were not obliged to do that. So that took away that constraint, and then you lower this threshold to explore contemporary dance in the hopes that maybe those people will actually come to a theater when that is allowed again, or take a class, or at least spark this tiny little corner of their brain where they're opening themselves up to other possibilities. It doesn't have to be contemporary dance, but just as a general. So I think there are two sides, this zooming in on the individual and the possibility of sharing your work with a wider audience than you could if you were just in the physical space together. And I think there are two ends of a spectrum that fascinate me in this.
Fabulous. Actually, I think from all of your thoughts and everything that all four of you are sharing, I think what I really feel is it's interesting to reevaluate the intentions that we now have as creators, performers, and teachers. Like, the intent will change, perhaps has changed, needs to be realigned, whether it is to your community, to the region that we cater to, or whether it is like Irene mentioned, the online platform, which sort of doesn't have any geographical restriction. We have Harpreet, who has joined us in the session here, and she has a question. Harpreet, can you hear us? Would you like to share your thoughts with us?
Yeah, I mean, it was wonderful listening to all of you. Thank you for creating this platform with what Delhi and we are undergoing. This looks like another bubble, and I'm glad it exists. You know, while simultaneously I was arranging for somebody's hospital bed, and then I could come back into this bubble. So, I mean, thanks to this digital world, which actually tells us about the bubbles we live in. So, Pranam Parvati Didi. I mean, thanks to you informed us. So, how I see the five of you, I mean, I resonated with all of you. A little about my background. I've been participating with the programs of Mahagam as well. I mean, at all the possible levels, thanks to what Parvati shared, decided to share and go online. So people like me who has background in academics and classical dance training really benefited, because we wanted to reach out to the other corner, which wouldn't have been possible due to jobs and other commitments. So this was possible. So I'm really a beneficiary there. But what made me raise my hand was Parimal's this whole concern about Parimal. It was fantastic listening to you. And it's such an irony. I'm just still imagining that Maharani's hall, and where three of us were sitting and exchanging our ideas, participating with others, and I'm still in that. I'm imagining that, and I'm speaking about this. So, Parimal, it was wonderful listening to you. But I would also speak like an academician. I did an academician's hat by saying that the journey of classical dance from Mandir, Fort to Proscenium, as we're taking Kathak, we had tough time. This time during the partial, the partial opening up of the lockdown, the prosceniums which were available to people like us, but they were difficult to get due to the norms. So there was a politics to this proscenium as well. Reclaiming it to better, so still more proximity. I don't know how would we do it in ask me coming years with the kind of situation we have right now, because it's not going to just be go into thin air like that. It's too much of it. So there was a politics of approaching the proscenium as well. It was not available like other things were available. So I would, I suddenly, this was a sudden eye opener to me. And another thing I would say that yes, in India there have been efforts to take by individual dancers to take even the classical dance to alternative spaces, and I heard I would agree with community with Nathaniel said very rightly that in all these years what I felt, and this lockdown has given me a pause, is that somewhere community doesn't own up the classical dance the way it could have, it should have. I have my own possible theories for the same, but I look forward to what Nathaniel says, and responding to Parimal, that there have been efforts. There have been solid efforts with classical dancers also, dancing on streets. I will not name it because I'm not patronizing any one person or his thought over there. But yes, that effort has been there. So maybe, you know, how would we do it? I'm not asking Parimal to do it. How would Parimal and I and others would actually bring in to the narrative of classical dance, which sometimes appears to be, you know, with respect and regard, Parvati, sometimes appears to be a bubble. Maybe because I wear two hats of academics and art, and I remain loyal to leftist philosophy as well. So I just I also, you know, like see that this owning up, if I add to what Nathaniel was saying, owning up of our classical, as you mentioned rightly about the studios, Parimal, I'm facing the same thing, living in a flat. So I think that owning up of the whole, you know, the whole philosophy of classical dance, you know, by the community, you know, how would we? I don't want to put a you know, burden. I don't want to put the. Everyone should know the classical, how beautiful. I mean, I'm experiencing the beauty, and thank you, Parvati. You know, in these times when 2-3 days seemed like every other news of somebody dying, I was like, कि मैं क्या करके नहीं क्या करके मरना चाहूंगी अगर मर भी गए तो it was थूंगा दिग थूंगा. So I really value the classical process as well. It's very beautiful, but at the same time, I wear the two hats. Sorry, Aditi, if I've taken too much of time, but you know.
No, that's absolutely okay.
How,
We hear you. We hear you.
so I value this process, but somewhere I always find it at conflict with the owning up of community, because I've
Sure.
found you know, audience who don't want to go. Nathaniel is right, you know, especially, you know, the academic side where I wear that hat. So
Sure.
and I'm not posing this problem to you. I'm owning up this problem with all of you. So
Sure. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Parimal, would you like to respond, Parvati Di, or actually
Yes,
there are a few
I
more
think
questions.
Harpreet had a very important point there. And what she also said, that yes, dancers have made those efforts of taking classical dance to other spaces. Yes, totally. And I totally agree with her. And I totally understand what she's trying to say there. What my point probably was, is that while you take to the same content to the other spaces, what I have realized that there is a mismatch of the space and the content. And that is where I was trying to highlight, which doesn't happen with contemporary, because contemporary emanates from that space. And that is why the whole context of site specific performance is what contemporary deals with a lot. And classical does not emanate from that space. You are juxtaposing classical on that space. And here is my problem with it. So my problem is not about taking classical to other spaces. My problem is that it doesn't emanate from that space. It doesn't look organic. I have problems with the organicity, Harpreet. That's where I was trying to underline.
Yeah, and there's one more thing, Parimal, which I wanted to add to what you said, is that most of the content, the Vastukrama or the Margam, which is performed on stage in a traditional classical performance, pre-anticipates a live orchestra. There is some kind of improvisation. There is some kind of spontaneous, extemporaneous component in the presentation, which makes it more live and more organic, as you said. So that component is something which you are deprived of when you are doing it online, which is one of the, I think it is the heart.
Which is the life.
That's what I was going to say. It's the heart and soul and the prana of Indian classical music and dance. So we are depriving, as it is, we are depriving our performances from this kind of energy. And the second thing which I have been observing since a long time is that post independence of India, we have not been able to organize our cultural sector properly, and most importantly, the performance sector. Surprisingly, what we have been observing is that culture is immediately combined with either tourism or with entertainment or with some kind of showcase. Why didn't we all these years? Why didn't we make an effort to make it an important component of academics, of community development, of ecological wisdom. And this is something which has been bothering me since a long time, and I've been struggling. And I do remember that even last year when I came to Pune University, I did stress on this cultural ecology and cultural economics. And I did say that, yes, in the coming days, we must focus more on this, because we've lost a lot of time. Right from the independence of India, we've not been actually reorganized. We've not been able to do that, that part of it. What we tried doing was reinstating the gurus, reinstating the art forms, documenting those, celebrating our heritage, and showcasing our heritage. You have any government function, you have classical dancers coming over and doing a nice spectacular dance. And I mean, then the rest of the year, I mean, no one comes and asks you, how did you manage, where are you practicing, how is your rehearsal space, and are you, there are other things also, like how has been your nutrition and your diet and your practice regime and your wellness program and things like that, which I really take care of when I work with my students. Because for me, it's equally important that they take care of their health, they take care of their fitness, they take care of their diet and nutrition, their emotional wellness, and many other things. So we don't have a system where people are sensitive to artists. Even there's one more question that has been bothering me since a while, is that since a year we see the dancers coming over and talking to another dancer, or there are organizations talking to each other. How about discussions initiated by the audiences? Where are our rasikas? Where are our rasikas? Are they missing us? Are they feeling deprived of performances? Are they feeling deprived of some kind of, I would say, transcendental experience, or a transformational experience? Because they've always come back and told the artists, audiences have always come and applauded the artists and said that we've loved the way you dance, we've loved this, and where are they? Do they need us? If they need us, they should come back and approach the artists and request them and console them. There are many of us, like as Parimal said, I think our generation, we know how to cope up with, I mean, our coping mechanism is slightly better than the younger people. But I know that when this lockdown began, the whole population of young dancers were totally shattered. They took up to social media with a lot of frustration. They started writing. Some of them even started writing that I was a student of science or engineering or this, and I quit this to become a dancer, and I just put my heart and soul to learn this art form, and I don't know where to go from here. So we didn't have a system to console. We didn't have a system to take care of their emotional turbulences. We didn't have a national policy to even, I mean, I do not want to say that there should be a grant, and I mean, of course, it will be great to have grant schemes and all that. But even if we didn't work out on that, even a word of assurance, respect, acknowledgement, and recognition that you are custodians of our heritage. All of you have, put in your life and your heart and your soul and your, hard work and everything towards preservation of heritage about which our country is so proud. Because whenever there is a festival or something, it's the classical dancers who are asked to represent the cultural heritage of India. So that is where I think I was expecting that there could be some kind of sensitivity, some kind of, sensitive response from the public, from the people, from the community for whom we've been working. Like most of us, we've been educators, and we do a lot of things to generate awareness, to establish a dialogue with society, establish a dialogue with people from various walks of lives. So, so that is also something that has been at the back of my mind as to what is our audience doing? Are they watching OTT?
I'd love to carry on from what you were saying, Parvati ma'am, and very inspired and feel a real affinity with what you're saying. here at the Goa Dance Residency, it's really been about trying to find a more holistic path for those dance artists who come to us and move on in their lives. When I was lucky enough to study, to train in contemporary dance in the UK, in London, and lucky enough to train in a lot of somatic practices and modern dance practices which actually have their roots in the Indic and yogic knowledge of India. This wellness, this pranic, as you say, this spiritual aspect of being an embodied artist really came to the forefront for me, making me realize that dancers, dance artists, dance teachers, those who have dedicated their life to dance, really should be valued, as you're saying, like as custodians of the lived experience that holds so much value for people to be inspired, to be rejuvenated in their daily lives. And so I really hope that in time in India, this value that really is at the heart of Indian culture, especially the kind of aspects of Indian culture that people like myself and many, many other foreigners come to India for, to rediscover or ignite within themselves. I really have a hope that that dance institutions, and especially based on the Gurukul system, become hubs, centers for not just dance training, but wellness training, for embodied training, for yoga, for philosophy, coming back to that real embodied lifestyle and having an effect on those who come in, but also having an effect on the local community as well. I really have a strong, positive kind of hope that that's what is unique about India. That's the unique kind of blessing that India has given to the world and has given me the opportunity to be an embodied person, you know. And I really hope that this can come round full circle and start to germinate again and have a new influence on the world, like it did 100 years ago when the yogis came to America and inspired those modern dance artists to create a new art form.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you. Lots of stuff to reflect on, and I think more in terms of looking at not just dance as a part of life, but looking at dance as life and as a part of how we live and how we breathe and how we eat and just survive. I think there are a lot of questions and a lot of people are reacting on the chat, and Daksha saying that a lot of good points brought up. Thank you to all the speakers for their views. It will be an ongoing dilemma for a while for all the artists. There's another question that Krupa has asked. She's saying that since we are witnessing a rise in workshops and webinars focusing on sharing the experience or the process of expressing through movement, my question is, do you all see dance shifting its base to more experimental level rather than just a performing art? Will the line of the audience and the performer blur in the future?
Interesting question, I would say. I don't think we know what will happen. I do think that it's a possibility. I think it's a very interesting thought. But I also think that there is still a very, very strong desire in a lot of people to explore this side of being an interpreter, a performer of existing repertoire, whether we're talking about classical repertoire or contemporary repertoire, because we have that as well. If I'm talking about my own experience training at the Merce Cunningham Dance Company, of course, that's also repertoire that exists, and that is something that I really believe that is sort of a base, whether you talk about classical or early modern choreographies or repertoire and techniques. It's like a base of where you start from. And I think there could be two sides to that question. One is, yes, maybe you can invite your audience more to share in the experience of moving with the performers. If what we were talking about earlier, contemporary dance emanating from a certain space, a public space, maybe inviting this blur between audience and performer. And at the same time, I think you would also need those performers to initiate this blurring of the lines between who stands where or who takes what role in the experience of a live performance. And for that, I think you need trained performers, and whether that's in one technique or another, or in analysis, that I think that's up for many interpretations. But so yeah, I think it's an interesting question that we could take with us from this. So thank you for posing that question. But I don't think it will ever disappear.
Yes.
If that's what you're, if you're thinking along those lines.
Just one thought. I think Kripa, thanks for this question, because this is something which I've been thinking since a while about the importance and the role of the audience. And for many dancers, since they've been working in solitude, it has brought newer frontiers in their own creative expression and in their own way of experimenting with their own technique. The technique which they may have learned, the technique which they may have rediscovered over time through practice and reflections. And this again brings me back to the traditional way of learning, because it was an important component in the Indic system of learning dance and music was Swadhyay, where you learn through reflection, you learn through your own contemplation. And for a very long time, we were not able to facilitate that, though we did want that to happen. But I think most of the dance gurus, music gurus, or dancers and learners, they were having a hectic lifestyle. And so that whole space for reflection and working in solitude was not getting realized or getting manifested for a very long time. So this lockdown has in a way facilitated that kind of working in solitude, which has enabled many dancers to come up with some kind of newer realization or revelations with respect to technique. And another thing which if I may go back to the Shastras, to the ancient texts, not all components or not all aspects of the dancing or singing was ever considered to be performed for an audience. So we did have an important component called the ritualistic aspect of dancing or singing, and that never pre-anticipated an audience. And we've had a heritage and a tradition of art forms that have survived for centuries, that have been ritualistic. And when we talk about emotional wellness and emotional hygiene, I've seen these artists extremely satisfied. They glow with knowledge and passion and inspiration. Performing for audience has never been the main purpose for them to continue dancing or presenting their art form. I mean, there can be an audience, but that's not the aim. So we still have such artists who are representative of the ritualistic tradition, or art forms that are presented as part of celebration. Even those performances, like look at a dandiya or a garba or so many other festivities and so many other dances that have been traditionally passed on since centuries. These dance forms have been a way how mankind has tried to celebrate life, tried to celebrate coexistence. So in a way, I think in this pandemic situation, we are again able to answer or reconnect with these answers or these questions, that why I dance. What is dance to me? Is it celebration of life? Is it celebration of coexistence? Is it my way of connecting with nature or the divine element? Or am I, when I'm dancing, even in my small little dance space or my bedroom or wherever, can I consecrate this space through my movement, through my mind, through my energy? So this is bringing newer revelations, and I'm so happy that even younger people, and I'm sure everyone is asking such questions and finding answers for themselves.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think this is a good space to sort of hold on, because we sort of have a lot to think about, reflect on for ourselves, as well as where we belong, where we come from, what are we doing with this art form. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. Before I sign off, is there any closing thought that you guys may have to share? Something that you feel you wanted to talk about, but we haven't really had the opportunity to throw some light on it. Parimal, Nathan, Irene.
I think most of the questions and most of the points which have been brought out by panelists as well as the viewers here have been very interesting. And I feel very interesting points came out of it. What we call the process of Manthan actually happened right here. And it was a very kind of a calming and a nice pace. I like the pace of the whole discussion, which is very, some discussions are so quick like an Instagram browsing, but this particular discussion was so nice and the whole aspect of Itminan was there. So I thoroughly enjoyed listening to all the panelists. Thanks Aditi and thanks IAPAR for making this happen.
It's a pleasure. Irene, Nathan, anything,
Yeah, I just want to, whoever's here, whoever's watching this, that I hope that whatever positive thing that you find in this time, you will keep it and take it to let your practice evolve. Because I think that's something different for everyone, but I think everyone can find something that you didn't expect to come out of this year or year and a half or however long it's going to be. And then let it positively influence your practice and take it with you into the future.
Krupa has a message. Thank you, Parvati Didi and Irene ma'am, for sharing your views. It was really wonderful to witness these sessions. Many learning points and many points to ponder upon. Thank you, IAPAR, for organizing this. Thank you, Krupa, for that message. And it really has been a very, very enriching discussion. So thank you all for being here. And for making the time to do this. Yeah, we're taking back a lot of wonderful, wonderful thoughts with us. So, and I think it's going to be a journey of reflection. So, yeah.
I'd just like to, again, thank you for inviting me to speak today. It's a huge honor. And it's really lovely to briefly meet the other panelists, especially those who I have not had the pleasure of meeting before. And yes, just following again on from what Parvati ma'am was saying about understanding why it is that you dance, and also what Irene was saying, what is at the core of your practice and the core of why you have dedicated your life to being a professionally embodied individual, and what service does this give to the world in general? What contribution does this make to the world? I think really holding on to that, whilst, as Irene was saying, spending time on your own practice. I think this is the grounding that everybody needs. And also it sets the foundation for really growing into the future and innovating to create new opportunities to reach those people with that intention, because it's only that that's really going to make long-lasting positive changes for the growth of dance infrastructure and the revaluing of culture within the country.
Thank you, Nathan. There's another message from Nadi. She's saying wonderful discussion and really sparked a lot of questions for me as an emerging artist of both Eastern and Western dance forms. So thank you to the panelists and IAPAR for the session. Thank you, Nadi, for this feedback. And I think what we really wanted to do was to sort of connect this bridge between the younger, people like probably Nidhi, or even younger who've just begun, who are trying to explore, and then also have this panel that has experienced a few more seasons than them. So to hear and it's such an honor and a privilege to actually hear your thoughts. Thank you so much. I'm going to say goodbye to our audiences on Facebook and also the lovely people who've joined us on Zoom. I would like to request the panelists to stay back just for a bit before we say goodbye to everyone. So thank you so much. Bye-bye Facebook. We will see you tomorrow, and see you. Happy dance season.